Hello everyone, it's Diane. I have a little tiny journal to share with you today. This is for a custom order, and it was made with this very vintage book called The Boat Club. And it has faint red roses and green vines around it. They're a bit faded because it is such an old book. Here's the book block that I took out. This didn't have a date in it, but I think it was inscribed to someone. I'm going to send these pages to my customer. 1901 is the date it was inscribed. So, it just has two signatures. It is 4 inches wide by 6 inches, so it's just a little one. I put this pretty crocheted lace with a little bit of embroidery on the spine, and I put these book corners on because the corners were quite frayed. And the seam binding closure is right across the spine, glued on, and then just ties. So, just go inside. She can put her name on that. And she liked my reading book that I made for myself recently. And I used vintage children's book illustrations and Mrs. Coggs, A Good Book digitals. Liz Smith's Etsy shop is Mrs. Coggs Crafts in here. Now I used the first edition in my book, and I used the second edition in Rose's book here. But she wanted me to use children's book illustrations and Mrs. Coggs pictures too, so that's what I did. So there's a little bit of lace sewn on here, and this illustration from Mrs. Coggs. I sewed that on as a pocket, and then I have these cute little tags that I cut with my Cricut that I just tucked right in there. And there's a fabric collage, and there's a children's book page. And I just put this tag on there. There's some stamping. Here's some trim along the bottom. This is cut from a Hans Brinker book and glued on. Vintage ledger, scrapbook paper, and there's some fabric stitched along the side here and a little tiny loose piece there. Some little houses from a Richard Scarry illustrated children's book. Little stamp. This is another children's book page, and it's from a French fairy tale book. This is a vintage ledger page. It's blank on the back. This is from a vintage children's book. A little girl taking her dolly for a walk, and there's a tag that I made with numbers on it, and another picture from Mrs. Coggs. This lady fell asleep with the book in her lap. I've done that. And another vintage book page. There's some hearts on the string. I love that little boy. There's some trim stitched to the top and a Mrs. Coggs image on this tag. This is from the French book. I just left that so you can read the poems on both sides. More fabric stitched along the edge. This one is gathered. Vintage ledger. Oh, excuse me. More fabric collage, a little piece of lace. I left the strings hanging, Rose. I can cut them off, or you can cut them off if you don't like them. And on the back of the signature, there's Mrs. Coggs' image that's glued down, and This is a double pocket. This is some fabric, or not fabric, it's paper lace. And so there's 2 tags in there and 2 tags behind. Second signature has another little Mrs. Coggs pocket with a couple of little tags and some lace. Children's book page with a fabric flip and some pom-pom trim stitched to the bottom. Vintage ledger. This is from a Beatrix Potter book. And this is from a little book about a circus. I just glued a piece of lined paper there for journaling. This is from a little children's book. I glued that on as a pocket, and actually I stitched it on, put these little tags in there, and then gathered some fabric up there. It's a grandma and grandpa playing with their grandchildren. And there's a Kate Greenaway illustration, a little bit of black trim at the top, and a little child reading a book with some velveteen ribbon at the top. There's the circus train. And then here I just attached a page from a little Beatrix Potter book with a paper clip. It's got the hedgehog, Mrs. Tiggywinkle, and there's room to write on this paper. And here's the other side of the Beatrix Potter book that got stitched in. More fabric. Here's a nursery rhyme from a children's book. And the back signature again, another Mrs. Coggs image, a little tag tucked in there, and a tag tucked in there. And then this is a children's book illustration stitched to coffee dyed paper, and that's tucked in there. And the back has a tag with a children's book illustration. And there's a pocket here that I made out of scrapbook paper. So, Rose, I hope you like this, and whenever you're ready, I can list your journals for you and get them sent to you. Hope you enjoyed this. Have a good day.